Welcome back to Salt City Counseling. Once again, my name's Scott. I'm a licensed therapist here in the beautiful state of Utah. This is basically going to be part two on addressing trauma, which is part three in my series on healing your own mental illness. So if you have not watched part one on trauma, please go back and watch it. I provide many disclaimers on there in regarding to addressing your own trauma. I talk about trauma thresholds. I talk about dissociation and all of that. So if you have not watched that one, part one, please go back and watch that one first. This video is, you're going to do much better with this video if you watch that video first. Particularly these videos on trauma, please watch them in order. If you plan on doing things to address your own trauma, please watch these videos in order. Another quick disclaimer. This is not medical advice. This is not therapy advice. You have to make your own decisions for your own well-being. You're responsible for those decisions. Not I. I am not. I'm only here to provide some psychoeducational content to help you be better educated, to have more insight on these types of things. That's all. This is for information purposes only. What you choose to do with it is on you. Okay. So this is part number two, okay? On I'm going to call this like just having more open and honest talks about trauma, okay? So one of the things that I have found is that a lot of people have endured trauma. They don't realize that they've endured trauma, particularly what we might call little t or little trauma. There's generally speaking, when it comes to trauma-informed care, there's what's considered big T and little t. I'll get into those. To me, small t is more so like psychological trauma, which is not to be downplayed, man. It's really not. To me, psychological trauma by itself can have a tremendous impact on an individual and how they live their lives, how they conduct themselves. It affects their relationships. It affects their decision making. It affects all kinds of things. Big T generally is physically violent, but also kind of has that psychological component to it as well, which is sort of why it's the big trauma, because it has both. It usually has both things attached to it. But most people, I find, don't particularly know that they've endured the little t's, the psychological trauma, or what I might call a soft T, just meaning that it's not necessarily tied or anchored to a one singular concrete event versus maybe ongoing. Like maybe you had a parent that was too critical, that it just constantly criticized, which to me, being overly critical is one of those small T's. I'm going to get into small T's. I'm going to get into big T's. And I'm also going to talk about and start laying some foundation about resourcing and building your resources. Okay. In regards to doing trauma work, it is really, really important to focus early on building a very, very large, firm, robust, and reliable methods and means to cope, to manage, to resource, and to do well in regards to managing what may come up. And it's really important to learn to make a lot of those, turn those things into habits. Because, frankly, those who have endured trauma and those who have trauma that still lingers, they tend to shut down. They tend to experience a form of paralysis. They tend to just kind of close in, get small, shut down. And what you need to do is get busy. You need to get moving. You've got to do something different, right? You've got to, like, physical movement. Probably one of the number one things I would recommend if you experience dissociation, if you, if you're getting close to your trauma threshold. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the first video. But if you're approaching your trauma threshold and you're experiencing some dissociative symptoms, physical movement is going to be one of your best options. Now, you're not going to feel like doing it, and you must do it anyways. Frankly, physical movement is great for depression. It's great for anxiety. It's great for a lot of things. It's great for trauma, and people don't want to do it. When they feel depressed, when they feel anxious, when they're dissociating, they just want to shut down. And so one thing that you must do to help yourself is to get out and get some physical movement, preferably outside, preferably in nature, even just going for a walk. I realize for some people, That's not always a good option. But what I'm saying is, right, get up and physically move is going to help you cope. It's going to help you kind of get back into the moment, because trauma is going to pull you back to how and when the trauma occurred. And what you want to do is get back to the here and now, especially if the here and now is a lot safer. By the way, if you are in a situation where there is ongoing abuse or violence or trauma happening, doing trauma work is not recommended. Highly, highly not recommended. You have to create a safer environment before you can do trauma work. If you try to do trauma work when you're in a situation or you're in a position in your life where there's ongoing trauma or ongoing violence or whatever, you're likely going to do more harm to yourself than good if you do trauma work. So part of the trauma work is just getting to an environment or creating an environment or changing your environmental factors where there is physical safety, physical and emotional safety. Okay? Yeah, we're going to cover a lot of ground here. Trauma, man, it's complicated. It's very, very complicated. It's very difficult. Again, it's a game of inches, okay? So, going to get back to the resourcing part of it. I'm just kind of going through my notes here because I want to keep the video fairly brief but fairly helpful. Okay, if we get really honest with ourselves, a lot of us endure things that were traumatic. We don't see them as traumatic. We saw them as normal. We didn't know as children that they were abnormal. We didn't see them as harmful because we just thought they were normal. I hear this from clients sometimes that they go like, holy crap, I realized that, when I was young, I thought that was normal. And it's not normal. So one of the first things maybe to examine was what did I grow up with that was considered normal but was not normal. I've heard clients talk before that they grew up in homes with parents that even said that sexual abuse is normal, and it's just it happens to everybody. Oh well. And I think that's sick. I think that's really sick. I think that's really wrong. I would scold those parents. I promise you, I would really scold them. Don't tell your children that it's normal to be sexually abused. What is going on? What is happening there? But my point rings true, is that people might grow up thinking like, oh, this is normal. This is what happens. This is what people do. So ask yourself, maybe first off, like, what have I accepted that to be normal that maybe isn't normal? Shifting gears here, going into small t or soft t. Just going to list off some things that could cause some little t or soft t psychological types of trauma as a child, okay? Like bullying, even just not being properly validated. To have parents that were invalidating, that they would never say anything positive. They would never say, I love you, I'm proud of you, good job, or anything like that, okay? Can actually cause psychological trauma. A person can grow up into adulthood and enter adulthood believing that they're not good enough and that they never will be, and that therefore sends their life on a different trajectory than maybe it would have if they had been validated. Emotional neglect kind of falls under there. This is a big one. Shame. This is a huge one. The big thing to remember with shame is that with shame, the message is that you're wrong, you're bad, you're flawed, you're defective, versus like, I made a mistake. I did something I shouldn't have. I did something that I can learn from and make changes. Shame is like, no, this is just who you are. Okay? Shame is very, very traumatic. Can be very traumatic. Living with shame can cause your life to just go on one path when you would prefer to have gone on another one. This is a big one that a lot of people don't realize is going to cause psychological trauma, but I stand firmly by it. And that is constant criticism. I already mentioned it. A lot of people, a lot of parents even think that by criticizing you, I'm helping you be better. And it's not true. We are experiencing a massive mental health epidemic in our Western cultures. And constant criticism, never-ending criticism, and the belief that criticism is positive is a big part of the problem. It's one of the reasons why kids don't grow up with any identity or any self-esteem, is because everything is totally cut down and criticized on a constant basis, okay? And another one that is soft T or little t that we don't talk nearly enough about is control. People controlling each other, people trying to control each other, parents trying to control their children. I see this with parents. It's rampant totally rampant that they are trying to control their children. Frankly, I see this so common with moms, the controlling moms, and even ones that are really, really well-meaning, well-intended, are really controlling, and it's harming their kids. And some of them don't want to hear it. And frankly, ladies, you have control issues. You do. I'm not saying guys don't. We certainly do too. But God almighty, like with the controlling moms, man, sometimes I've had enough of them. Okay, but control will cause trauma. Okay, to have your life controlled and micromanaged will cause small t. Okay, let's get into the big T. A lot of this stuff is going to be really obvious, so I'm just going to rush through this list. Okay, violent incidents, abuse, like I know I've worked with someone who parent tried to drown their beloved family pet when they were a kid right in front of them. That's very traumatizing. Okay, abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse. Right, sexual abuse is very common. It happens within families. Siblings on siblings, and it goes both ways. It really does. I know a lot of people out there don't believe or think or know that females can abuse males. It absolutely happens. And domestic violence, just to name a few, right? Like as a child, you might have watched your father hit your mother. That's trauma. That's going to be traumatizing. Okay. So the next part here is going to be building a system of resources, but I'm realizing that this is going to need another video. So up until this point, just put a pause. If you're wanting to do some of your own trauma work, just put a pause button on it. Just stay tuned. Be patient with it. In the next video, I will cover just building a system of resources. That's going to be your biggest and most important steps when it comes to working on your own mental illness, is really, really building a solid system of resources. I already mentioned one thing. Get up and physically move. Go for a walk, ride your bike, walk your dog, whatever you got to do. Okay? Get on your exercise bike. If you're outside, it's better. But I realize that's not always an option for all people, or a good option. Okay? But get up and physically move. And frankly, sometimes you're going to have to force yourself to do it. That's the number one thing. In fact, I like it. The idea of it's just important to build a routine. Build a routine of physical movement, of physical exercise, and just do it whether or not you feel like it. Okay. And again, it can be as simple as going for a walk, or riding your bike, or walking your dog. Just get into the habit and routine of doing it can be really, really helpful. But I will cover more on the resourcing part in the next video. I got to get going. I got a client here in a few minutes. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Put your questions in the comments below, or you can email me directly, scottc@saltcitycounseling.com. Hang in there, folks. I believe in you very much, and we'll see you in the next one.